So the title, How to Not Think in Categories, and if you follow this channel, you know that's an inside joke because to think is to think in categories, and there is no way around this. And every time I do one of these videos, I get this feeling. It reminds me so much of when I was a professor and I'd go into the classroom, and every time before I'd start a lecture, I thought, this is the most important lecture I'm ever going to give. And of course, I knew the paradox of that. They can't all be like that, but it generates a certain feeling. And it's the same way I have when I do these videos. Like, this is definitely the most important video I've ever done. And it gets right at the core of thinking and the fact that we have a thinking problem and we're trying to think our way out of it. And that just creates the human dilemma, the human situation. And so how do you not think? Well, I could ask a different question. How do you walk? How does the earth rotate? I mean, all these things, the vast majority of things that go on in what we call the world or the universe, they simply happen. And they actually go on very easily and fine without thinking. It's just like the old Zen saying that water will settle when it's undisturbed. And thinking is that disturbance. And so things actually go along a little bit more smoothly without thought. But when we break thinking down into, well, thinking is to think in categories. And then it becomes really funny because we see how tricky categories are, because then we say, well, okay, here's categorical existence and then non-categorical existence. And then that itself becomes another category. And so in the book, in the workbook, I talk about if you just, we could do this example from the workbook, and you could take a flower, you could take anything, or you could just watch this flower as we do this exercise. And so when we experience something, it's a lot like Phaedra's, one of the classics is Zen and Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. And one of the first quotes I would give, actually every first day of class, is right from Zen and Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, and it is, we take a handful of sand from the endless landscape of awareness around us, and we call this handful of sand the world. And that's what we do with object perception. And so right now there's an endless landscape of awareness around us, and the right brain is pretty good at picking up that. But that left brain zooms in on just these categorical qualities, and so it sees this as a flower. And there's someone out there, you probably know what kind of flower this is. It falls under some kind of category, but it's yellow and it has features and it's soft and it has boundaries. The flower is there and I am up here, and all those boundaries are all what we indulge when we do thinking. Because thinking is nothing more than this process of categorization. And how do we dissolve those boundaries? How do we get out of this without getting deeper into it? Well, Rupert Spira has a really nice metaphor when he talks about consciousness, and he talks about it being like a phone. The screen on the phone is consciousness, and it has all these different kinds of content that come on the screen. So right now, maybe this flower is on the screen of consciousness. And that's a great metaphor. He's a great teacher. But I like to go a little different with this, because sometimes when it's put that way, it might sound like the content is different than consciousness. So let's take a different metaphor for this exercise. And as you're looking at this, let's say consciousness is like the sand on a beach. And we draw in the sand this picture of a flower. Now the sand is consciousness. And it's not like this flower is an image on the screen. This flower is nothing more than consciousness itself manifesting in a slightly different, interesting shape. And so when you look at something simply as simple as a flower or anything around you the rest of the day, these are not separate from consciousness. To say and ask this question is like, well, is the flower conscious? That misses the mark, because that is this neuropsychological perspective, which is really useful as a pointer. But that neuropsychological image is as if consciousness is up here and somehow I am being conscious of the flower. If you consider the sand metaphor, all the things you will experience today, the sand is consciousness, and all the images, all the experiences are just the sand itself manifesting in different ways, which is to say, all of those images are themselves conscious.